Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners.
It was just getting those first ones of like, hey, I'm okay with this and I'm going to let it go. And maybe I'm not going to put $400,000 into one deal, but maybe I'll do $20,000 on 20 different deals and figure out, oh, this is what I like or don't like from a capital preservation standpoint, just getting started.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I'm your host, Billy Keels, and I want to welcome you back to another fantastic conversation. So also, for those of you who have continued to share across social media and LinkedIn and Instagram, really want to say continue to do that. Thank you so much for your support. Also, too, if you want to leave that honest written review as well as rating, you can go ahead and do that. We've got a nice little video that can help you to do that. And then, you know what? If you're looking for any of the previous episodes, I think there's well over 300 by this point in time, just go to firstgencp.com/podcast, and you can check out every single podcast that we've ever done. Once again, firstgencp.com/podcast. And today, if you're someone who has been an engineer, or you are currently an engineer and you've enjoyed your role, or you are enjoying your role, and at the same time, you want to be able to connect with others, you want to build your education base, then you're really going to get a lot out of today's conversation. Our guest is from North Dakota. He is the co-founder of Home Equity Partner, and we're going to get to the conversation with Adam Zock, and we're going to get to that just after this. So you know what? If you've ever wanted to know how to start a family, have a job, and a side hustle to be able to accelerate your long-distance investing success, then this is absolutely the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Because today's guest not only started out as a grad research assistant, I'm sure he's going to tell us a lot more about that. He was also an engineer in his home state, and I'm not going to tell you where that is. He's going to tell you that. He also is a real estate specialist, and he likes to focus on something called buy and hold in the real estate investing space. That sounds like music to my ears. Check this out. He's also invested currently, I believe, and maybe the numbers have changed, but in 13 different states. I would say that that's definitely long distance, especially when you find out where he's living. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation the co-founder of Home Equity Partner, Mr. Adam Zock. Adam, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Billy. Nailed the last name too. It's back to the German roots, and it's music to my ears.
All right, there you go. So you're already making this European connection with this guy from Columbus, Ohio, who's over here in Europe and all that kind of good jazz. Yeah, man. No, so I thank you very much. I practiced it like 89 times before I said it because I kept wanting to say something different, but you gave me a nice little clue, and that helped to click it in the brain. But we won't tell everybody. It'll be our secret. So no, here's the thing, Adam. You know, you're going to get 5 questions today, at least. You're going to probably get more than that. But the thing is, there's a couple things that I try to do, which is like tell your entire backstory in 1.5 seconds. It's not really ever going to be possible because you've already done too much. You have a focus and you're helping too many people. But I'm a recovering perfectionist. So it's one of these things that just happens. So hopefully you'll forgive me. But more importantly, you'll help me with 2 things. One, if you could tell your backstory in your own words. And then secondly, if you can also talk about some of the major decisions that you've made. But put that on hold for a second, because first of all, I want you to tell people, where is it that you call home today?
I call home Fargo, North Dakota, which is pretty close to Canada. And I grew up in a town that was a population of about 17,000, moved to the big city of 100,000 for our population. So, and the whole state has a population of about 600,000. So we got just about as much cattle as we do people.
Hey, man, fantastic. But you moved to the big city, almost like 5x to the number of people that were around you, a little bit more than 5x, but fantastic. Appreciate you sharing that, Fargo, North Dakota. And then also, before you tell your backstory, if you could help us understand, what's the most positive thing that's happened to or for you in the last 24 hours?
So we just got back from a trip to the lake, which is this goal of mine of being able to spend an incredible amount of time with our kids. I have a 5, 3, and 1-year-old. And so the ability to teach them catching bugs, fishing, doing all like the life lesson stuff, school and education is one piece, but just being able to sit there and be like, oh, here's an opportunity where sometimes it's planned and premeditated, like, oh, I want them to learn this. But a lot of times it's just, I want to quote unquote waste time with my kids. And just to form that special friendship and connection We just got back here last night, but we spent the weekend and spent yesterday, the full day just out, beautiful lake water, just kind of gaining some perspective and just deepening that relationship with my kids.
Man, 5, 3, and 1. Absolutely love that. And being able to get that quality time. And as you say, be able to waste some time. I would probably say it's investing time, but you're doing it in a way that absolutely makes sense for you and your kids, and not necessarily always having an objective. I think it's fantastic. So appreciate you sharing that with us today. And I kind of got ahead of myself. I asked you the question before, but would love for you to share your backstory, share it in your own words. Talk about you can take a lot more than a second and a half. You can take whatever time, but just remember, if you could also talk to us about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey, and we'll see where you're not taking conversation from there.
For sure. Yeah, I was born one of 6 in a small town in North Dakota. And so there wasn't a whole lot of wealth in the family, but I had a lot of siblings to fight with and do fun things with. And it was kind of the traditional, I had very loving parents. I was blessed for that. They fought, they had all the different things, but it was eventually, okay, get through high school. And one of my first major decisions was, where do I want to go to school? Do I want to do that? What does that look like? And I remember my dad saying, hey, you can go anywhere but here. Just go somewhere else, just so that you learn that experience. And all my friends were going to one college, so I picked the other one, just to learn a little bit and what's it like to be accountable and take some responsibility in my life. And at 18, 19, there's not a whole lot there, but it was kind of a de facto, didn't have a whole lot of mission in my life of like, other than, hey, you're good at math and science, let's do some engineering. Made that decision, just kind of went through. And I love the idea of the marshmallow test, which is what I do with my kids. It's like, ooh, can I have delayed gratification? Can I suffer through these courses? Can I do these different things for, some future reward as we go forward here? And so I even play little tricks with my kids. I'm like, hey, literally, here's a marshmallow. If you wait for Alexa to wait 5 minutes and, can go forth and wait, you can get the second marshmallow. And it's kind of a fun psychology test to see if they can handle that delayed gratification. But eventually it was that. And it wasn't until 2012 where I really had my first, major pivot, which was, am I going to leave our first home that we had bought, my wife and I, and it just like sell it and go with the next one and kind of keeping up with the Joneses? And you live in a property, you sell it, you move to the next one, you move it. And we made that decision to keep that as the very first rental in 2012 when I was about 24 years old. And that was not an easy decision. And so I had the engineering background, we had the W-2, freshly married, all of this fun stuff. And it was not quite married there, but was dating my now wife. And it was like, ooh, what should we do with this? And I remember being this close to never getting into real estate because our first tenants flooded the basement and we're pulling up carpet on a Sunday night. And I'm so glad that those small setbacks allowed us to kind of keep pivoting and going forth. And then it was finding podcasts and different things like what you have here, Billy, that I call it my kind of Adam 2.0, which was the discover of personal development and learning. And from there, really, really enjoyed taking off and then getting married, starting the family, going from there.
Oh man, that's fantastic. So, one of 6 kids, taking us through the journey to the point of, being there on a Sunday night, basement flooded, and you and the missus are kind of accidental. Well, I guess probably not accidental at that point, but you're in landlord. But something you said after that was Adam 2.0. I'm definitely going to pick up on that. But you said something early on, which I think is pretty interesting. So as one of 6 kids, you made one of your first decisions, and that was whether or not you wanted to go to college, right? To get more formal education. It sounded like you did that. But then there was this conversation with your dad, and your dad was like, who, based on the way that you're saying it, I would like for you to validate the fact that your dad had a positive influence on the way that you made the decision and where you eventually went. But it's pretty interesting because if I heard you correctly, you said your dad said that you can go anywhere but here, which normally most parents would say, well, you can go as long as you stay here, like nearby. So I don't know where here was, but I guess how did that help you or getting that kind of influence from your father, who I'm just making an assumption is a positive influence? What was that like for you to hear him say, go anywhere but here?
Yeah, I had tremendous blessings as a father, and he gave me lots of worldly advice. One of which was, make money with your mind, not your hands. And what you said, you can do that fun, but when you look out here in North Dakota, when it's wintering and people are doing construction on the roof with like steel, he's like, that might not want to be one of him. So luckily he had built up a great relationship, a lot of credibility. And his thing was, I think he was playing the challenger role, not that, you have the traditional like nurture versus challenger, but he was like, we're in, and this is the western part of the state, and it's, smaller population, smaller city. And he was like, if you don't leave from here, you might just get stuck in, kind of mom and dad's wing or umbrella. But if you go out, you're probably going to fail, and it's going to be really good for you. And so just getting that different experience, and I'm not necessarily saying failing quick, but just he wanted me to experience something else, and did the same thing with all the other individual kids, because our oldest, potentially stayed, maybe a little bit longer. And that's what they, either didn't want or just kind of learned something by having 6 kids. You get to, have a little bit of trial and error, not saying that one is right or wrong. I just remember him specifically giving that advice, and be like, whether it's the school or just the act of, hey, physically moving away, kind of severing ties, just to kind of be your own man.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very interesting perspective. I mean, interesting that you got that early on challenge, and really, your father giving you that input to say, hey, listen, think with your, create value with your mind, not necessarily with your hands, is a very, very unique and interesting perspective, especially early on, because so many people here just to do just the opposite, stay close by. That way we can see you all the time, and this and that and da da da. But I think that from what I do know about you, I believe that had some kind of a positive impact on you as well, and maybe even some of the focus area that you have today. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that in terms of combining the world of education, community building, and eventually, being able to, if it makes sense, invest together. Kind of talk to us about how these 3 worlds have kind of come together for you.
Sure. Yeah. So, it started off with this fact of how can you do something that's maybe an acceptable level of risk? And by that, I mean, hey, if you fail, you're not like bankrupt, or you don't lose your marriage, you don't lose your kids, or nobody's dying. But at the same time, how can you maybe get a reward to risk that's above 1? Instead of just flipping the coin and be like, hey, it's 50-50, how do you maybe stack this in your favor? And, him being a little bit wiser and older was like, okay, here's somebody that's either done it before you. He's got more years, more, knowledge, more under your belt. And so going through that, I then gravitated towards, okay, I maybe went beyond, where my dad typically went to school. And then I started latching on to masterminds, communities, and different things. I was like, oh, here's my people. These people get me. They understand. Like, I'm either starting kids, or like, what in the world do I do with a 1-year-old who's crying, uncontrollably? I was like, yes, my dad had 6 kids, but like, just the frame of reference of, like, I call it being in the thick of it. You get people that are like, hey, I understand what you're going through. This is what we're doing. And so the idea was, okay, well, how do we help people maybe in that similar boat with like the right time, the right message, and the right strategy to kind of either get them to make the next step or just climb the next ladder in the rung, because it can be so easy to get stuck in that paralysis analysis. And it's just like, okay, what unique skill sets are you sitting on that you could do something right now? And just Atomic Habits really break it down. And sometimes it's like, well, I need the right strategy. Sometimes it's, I need more information, or sometimes you just need somebody to yell at you and be like, hey, dummy, like you got to do this. You got to go work out. You got to, date your wife. You got to, do this investment if you want it. Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck in this kind of discomfort zone where it's a little bit too uncomfortable to do something, but then long term, you kind of be suffering in what you're doing. And so started joining as many masterminds and different things that I could. And to the point of eventually, okay, now left the engineering, career, leveraged it for 10 years to the point of, hey, this was one of the best things that happened to me, as I got to, leverage that bankability, the high income, doing all these different things to now build the passive income to then decide, okay, what do I want to do from here? And then, so now, it's helping individuals, and that's in that same realm, give them options and trying to figure out, okay, what do they want to do? So that, I know you can call it different kinds of money. Some people call it the FU money. Some people call it the financial freedom money. And so it's just giving people options on what they're doing, kind of coming at them on where they're at in their point of life.
So understanding where they are in their point of life, being able to map that back to figure out, okay, how can you help the individual get to a point where they're creating options, is one of the words that you mentioned before. And also you mentioned that you were leveraging your corporate experience. You mind if I ask you a couple questions just about your corporate experience? Because
Let's do it.
I am always fascinated by people's corporate experience, because a lot of times people will say, well, corporate, hated it, sucked, it was terrible, and blah, 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 and I had to leave it. Or sometimes you probably hear a lot of people that talk about, leave the day gig and you quit and just side hustle, all this stuff. And we talked about that before. But it sounded to me like that 10 years that you were leveraging, there was some positive stuff in there. Can you talk to us? I mean, you used a very clear example, but I want to make sure people heard it. But maybe just beyond the bankability and the stable paycheck, what are some of the other things that corporate helped you to be able to do, and you see the positive impact that you're making on others today as a result of the corporate experience?
Yeah. In addition to just, checking the boxes of stable income, giving my wife and I family security, one thing that I learned is I went into engineering and I was the one Googling at my desk, like, oh my gosh, what if I don't want to be a civil engineer? Because it was like the first couple of years and I was like, oh, I don't know if college really prepared me for this. Sometimes I was in the field. Sometimes I was doing stuff that I wasn't really passionate about, but it maybe made income. And so my first thought was to run away from the pain. Mm-hmm. And what I learned through some of the Adam 2.0 was like, oh, what if I actually learn to fall in love with my job? I don't know too many successful entrepreneurs that were like, I'm going to call it really bad employees that were really great at building, their own passive, income or business owners. They just happen to be like really high valuable people. They could have been CEOs. They could have been, if you're valuable in the workplace, you kind of understand that dynamics. And so for me, there was a lot of lessons learned of like, oh, how do I show up better and give my employer the benefit of the doubt as opposed to just milking it. And I had a coach who was a mechanical engineer. He's like, yeah, you know what I did for GE is I got into multi-level marketing. I was super excited about it. And I just kept working until they eventually figured out that I wasn't working and they fired me. He goes, and that was not a great way. He goes, to give them the benefit of the doubt, hold the integrity so that in the event that, maybe we want to, leave the W-2 or we want to do different things, the amount of flexibility and credibility and honor that you had built up with them is going to help out so much more tremendously. So I actually figured out, okay, what do I enjoy doing? And it turns out I was an engineer, but I actually enjoyed sales and business development, which is a little bit different than the engineers who just like spreadsheets. And so I realized that I was maybe in the wrong seat. And so then what I did is I said, hey, this is what I want to do. How can I work towards that? And over a period of 5 years, then you were like, oh, I actually enjoy my job, but now I have the choice of, okay, I get to still do this, but I'm looking for something better. And so as opposed to saying that I was a crutch or even college or school or different things, I still look back at it and be like, man, this really set me up from a great foundation. And then learning how a $50 million a year organization works with values and visions and how organizations work and Microsoft Teams and probably professionalism was just ingrained into you that I take for granted a lot of times that we can leverage.
Yeah. So it's one of these things. So you reflect back on it now and you realize that these are experiences that, yes, you're able to leverage. It sounds like you were fortunate enough to also have some people that say, hey, look, you want to be able to do it on your terms. And there are a lot of positive things that can come as a result of having the corporate experience. I did it for a really, really long time. And it's great to hear stories like yours or the perspective that you have, Adam, because it's one of those things where it just helps that person who may be struggling a little bit today saying, oh, you know what? Adam's already done it out there. Billy's already done it out there, but they don't remember what it was like. Well, we do. And one of the things that you can realize is that you don't have to hate the role that you do, that you can actually be able to get the best of both worlds when you're asking different questions, which it sounded to me like, Adam, you started asking yourself different questions, which you started also getting different results. So if you're okay, I just want to kind of pivot and want to ask one question that has to do with, long distance investing, because that's one of the things that we talked about before. You have these passions, but you're also living in a state where, I think you said less than 1 million people. And so it may be to some people that have been listening for quite a while, pretty obvious, but I would love to know from you, because most of the time it's kind of like that question your dad asked, could go anywhere, but here, like most of the time people say, well, when you're investing, sometimes they say you should start, but then they say you should only invest in your backyard. I'm just always curious, when you decide to invest long distance, what was it that gave you the confidence to be able to invest beyond your backyard to the point where it's at least 13 states and maybe more by this point in time?
Yeah, it's very interesting when you reflect back on it. You're like, oh, the last 40 homes I never saw. Like just flat out. It used to be like, oh yeah, you need to see it and I need to get the inspection report. You need to do all this stuff. And now it's like, okay, well, what would it look like if I didn't need that? And so then you start maybe journaling or coming up with the different ideas. And it's like, okay, what do I like about this? And that's eventually where we kind of ended on, with where it was the people first, property second. And similar to, if you're going to invest in a syndication, if you're going to do different things, like, if you're investing in the person and the asset class is maybe the secondary tier of what you're investing in, it's like, okay, who are the people that I trust, or how can I structure this thing a little bit differently? And so for me, it was a little bit getting out of my own way and be like, okay, if I have an inspection report and I got an appraisal and I vetted the tenant buyer or the location or different things, like, do I really, need to see this? And what are the potential downsides versus the upsides? And those first couple ones, it was like, okay, yeah, I'd love if it was a 10% cash on cash ROI. But for me, it was just, okay, just as long as I don't lose. All I want to do is like, upside is great, but just like, I don't want to lose, make this like a really bad experience. And I know there's like the Daniel Kahneman of like our pain is 2 times as strong as our win. So like you have to make more versus the fear of losing is just like 2 times as strong. And so just getting over that hump of, like, okay, if I do this and I hold it for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, like what's the worst that can happen? Oh, I probably have a home worth $400,000. Like that's like bottom worst case scenario. It's like, okay, can I live with that? Yes. Okay. So from there, let's now try to increase the likelihood of success moving forward. So then it's kind of having these different tripwires of the inspection, maybe the real estate agent, maybe the operator that you're investing with, or the strategy that you're doing. Like, okay, here are all the different things that I can do to kind of mitigate the risk. And so that's how we eventually went from different investment styles to the one that we're doing now, where we just find people that can't quite get the bank loan. We'll go out, find investors that are like, oh, I can get a bank loan, and kind of do a private mortgage between the 2 individuals so that you can kind of pre-flight an individual. They go pick the house and then you still get an inspection and appraisal. And then that's what really allowed us to scale over the last few years by leveraging that strategy. But there's a bunch of different strategies that you can do, whether it's a short term doing a syndication but it was just getting those first ones of like, hey, I'm okay with this and I'm going to let it go. And maybe I'm not going to put $400,000 into one deal, but maybe I'll do $20,000 on 20 different deals and figure out, oh, this is what I like or don't like from a capital preservation standpoint, just getting started.
And would you say that, so you got started and just, you use some words there towards the end, capital preservation and keeping your capital and the capital growth and these types of things. But it sounds to me that it was a matter of being able to get clear in your mind what it is that you wanted to do. You were able to then say, okay, these are the action steps that I want to take. You got some feedback, and then you continue down a certain path. You've developed new options. And then also it's the way that you have now decided to continue to move forward. Does that sound accurate?
I would agree. And the concept that I've had to explain maybe to me that I kind of use is the corridor principle of like, you're like, hey, I'm looking at getting my first investment, or maybe it's my next investment. And you're like, oh, what do I have to do to open up this door? And the only way you're going to figure out what behind that door is if you do it. And then as soon as you open that door, you're like, oh, turns out there's a bunch of other doors, or I could go backwards, and so like you get into this almost like the corridor of a hotel, and you're like, oh, I finally got into the lobby. And it's like, oh, well, it turns out now I have a bunch of different options, but unless you took that first action of getting it and doing it, you don't really understand all the different options. And there's so much that goes from the practical versus the theoretical once you get that first one.
All right. Well, that is one of the things that is, the practical application of what you're learning. So it's taking education, putting it into action. And then, you know what I'm realizing, Adam, like we've got to get into the going long final 3, but there's like one thing that I have to ask you before we get into the going long final 3, because you've mentioned it a couple times. As an engineer, you've also kind of moonlighted, and you have this fun with marketing, business development, sales, which is normally these 2 sides of the brain don't connect with one another. But talk about, I know I'm asking you to leverage, but like talk to us about how that engineering experience specifically is really helping you today in terms of the way that not just that you're looking to be able to make more sound decisions, but also how you're able to go out and positively affect others as a result of that, leveraging that engineering experience.
Yeah, I think engineers or maybe high income earners in general have one really unique trait that sets them apart, and that's the ability to solve problems. maybe the engineering thing is like, oh, this bike doesn't work. Oh, this spreadsheet doesn't work. Oh, this doesn't work. And we have like this unique thing of like just getting really basic with like, okay, well, if this doesn't go, then that doesn't work. Or if this doesn't happen, then that doesn't happen. And all of a sudden, if you can apply that same framework of, breaking down what that problem is and how A is connected to B and C goes to D, and finding that problem solving, that's one thing where I'm getting really clear, like, okay, what really is the problem? Because I forget the offer, but it's a better question, or the problem better stated, is way better than trying to answer the wrong question or problem. And so I think engineers specifically are like, okay, what is the actual problem? And it might be our product sucks. It might be marketing. It might be, whatever it is. And so having that ability to break it down and just be like, okay, here's problems 1 through 10, prioritize them, figure out what's the true root cause of the problem, and then solving that problem to get, kind of solving X for Y is a really unique skill set, especially from the engineering. And the problem is, though, that we find problems everywhere. So we want to solve a million problems. And the issue is focus then.
Okay. So being able to, that engineering backgrounds not only help you to ask different, better questions. I'll say both. Different, better questions, also being able to give you the right prioritization, and then following the prioritization, being able to focus on those things that should have the highest level of impact. And you can look at that across a number of different spectrums. I get that more or less?
For sure. And one thing that I forgot to answer to is I think we just look at things differently. It's just, you have your own unique environment, upbringing, skill set. You're like, oh, here's how they're doing it. What if I did this little tweak? And sometimes that tweak can be $1 billion idea.
Fantastic. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, listen, Adam, we got to get into the Go Along Final 3, man. And with you being our special guest today, I never ask anybody to go along Final 3 without you telling me that you're ready. So my question for you is, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You're the father of 3 who enjoys investing time with your kids. Of course you're ready, man. I knew you knew you were going to be ready. So here's the thing. I'm a guy originally from Columbus, Ohio. I've been living in Europe since, the last 22 years, which seems unbelievable. So we started with you in Fargo, North Dakota. I'd like to bring things back to this side of the pond where I've called home for the last 20 some odd years. And have you share with us what your favorite European city that you've either visited or still on your bucket list to visit? What city is that?
We did a kind of quote unquote mission trip to the Vatican, and we ended up doing Florence and Francis, kind of all throughout Italy, and having some religious roots myself. That was super impactful. My wife's done the Germany different trips, so we have it on our bucket list with our kids to go back either to the Vatican, to Italy, to Florence, to Assisi. And then, kind of where she went with some of her roots in Germany. So I did that trip across the right ocean, to go for it. It's been an amazing experience, and still have great fond memories of the Sixtine Chapel and the Vatican, and seeing the Pope. And it's just been awesome. All
right. So you want me to take Rome? Is that going to be your favorere? Okay.
I think so.
Okay. All right. We'll take Rome. Fantastic. Another thing is just, you talked about it before, you're trying new things, you're doing new things. And as you're taking action, there's always the opportunity to get where you need to be, but then sometimes you're not where you want to be. And so as a result, you have a learning opportunity. You've made a mistake. You've had some kind of growth opportunity. I don't want you to think about the mistakes. I don't want you to think about the growth opportunity. I want you to think about the lesson, and specifically one lesson that you learned that you believe would be highly impactful, positively impactful for the Going Long family. Share that one lesson that that we need to hear that you learned as a result of making a mistake.
Sure. I focus too much on ROI and not as much on ROTI, which is what I call return on time invested. Typically, you can leverage capital or you can leverage your time. But one thing that I forgot is partnerships and leveraging other people's skill sets. I thought everything had to be Adam, right? I have my own capital. I'm making my own money. I have my own time, and it's going to be the Adam show all the way through to now having 7 different LLCs with 5 different business partners, and then, doing different investment collaborations. But I really forgot that my best return on time invested is what Adam's really good at on his skill set, and the things that I try to do that are not my skill set. You can take like the DISC profile, for instance, and be like, oh, Adam's, pretty easy at having conversations. But when you get into like details now, there's someone who's like, not only are they good at it, but they love doing it. And so if someone's really good at presenting deals, somebody's really good at leveraging capital, maybe figure out what your specific skill set is and then focus on that, because your return on time invested for that specific thing that you're trying to do. I remember spending X amount of hours trying to do day trading. And I was like, man, if I spent 2,000 hours trying to get a 2% increase, I'm paying myself the equivalent of $1.25 an hour. And I was like, that is a terrible return on time invested, even if the ROI on my capital increases by 2%. And so thinking about how you can really leverage that by making it, hey, here's a quick decision, here's a little bit of capital, and then this is going to pay off while I sleep or while I do different things. So your time is no longer tied to it. I had missed that early on, but then eventually, kind of got through it once I realized that I was maybe wasting a lot of my time.
All right. So really thinking about the return on time invested and decision making. So appreciate you sharing that with us. And then the last thing, Adam, I really would love for you to share with us, because it's like you've given us so much to think about already, but help us understand, what is the one book that you would recommend to us today? You've talked about a couple already, but that would just help us to take our game to the next level.
MJ DeMarco's Millionaire Fastlane.
Millionaire Fastlane.
And the really cool concept for that book is he calls it the sidewalk, the slow lane, and the fast lane. And the sidewalk being people that are paycheck to paycheck or in debt. The slow lane is, just get a good job and invest in the 401k. And sure enough, when you turn 60, you'll be good. And then he calls it the fast lane, as if you want to do it any time by the time you hit retirement age, and gives a lot of great examples of businesses, enterprises, real estate, or other pieces that he can get to there, along with how he explains wealth, which is health, relationships, and then time freedom, which I really like his definition of wealth.
Oh, fantastic. Health, relationships, and time freedom. So we will make sure that we include the link in the show notes. And so don't worry if you're running or you're on your treadmill or you're just kind of walking outside. All you're going to have to do is click a link and you'll be able to get there and think about your sidewalk, your slow lane, and your fast lane. So I just think about you talking in the very beginning about hanging out with your 5, 3, and 1-year-old and just really enjoying your weekend, and then going from there and helping us realize from a family of 6. So, you've realized that early on, you had to kind of make sure that you're at the dinner table to get what you needed. And then while you're there, you had the good fortune of having a father that posed a pretty interesting question to you when it was time for you to make some decisions, a major decision in your life. Well, you already made one, you want to go to college. But then you heard that, oh yeah, but go anywhere but here. And so you actually took that advice on board, decided to follow that, and realized that life doesn't just have to be right exactly where you're from. You decided later on, you get married, you become accidental landlord, you're there on a Sunday night and you're like, man, I don't necessarily know if I really, really like doing this kind of stuff. But eventually you realize that, hey, Adam, you can not just do this, you and your wife and your family, you can create a lifestyle from that. And so over a decade of being able to enjoy your role and recognize there were things that you could also do to leverage that existing role and that previous engineering experience, you continue to do that. We talked about it earlier, home equity partner. You've talked about how you are bringing in education, how you're also bringing in real life conversations and then being able to take action. And so I know that there's so many people that are part of the Going Long family that are like, Billy, just ask him the question, please. So Adam, I'm going to ask you on behalf of the entire Going Long family. Can you help us understand what's the best way to get in touch with you or find out more about what it is that you're doing or more about what you've got going on at your company?
For sure. So for Home Equity Partner, if you just go to homeequitypartner.com/investors, that's going to be the easiest way to understand what we're doing. We got some free lease option contracts if you've never heard of, what those are. So you can download that on our website. And then if I could, the second one is a little side hobby that I have, which is called engineeringrei.com. And that's specific for dads who happen to have kids under 5 that are just what I call in the thick of it, where they're just like, man, I don't know if I can handle this 2-year-old not tying his shoes, or what does it look like when my 4-year-olds fight with my 2-year-old. And so I'm building a little community around that, because I think there's no more precious time that you have than when you're trying to figure out how you allocate your time between your career and your family and trying to balance that.
Yeah. Fantastic. So appreciate that. Engineeringrei.com. You can find out more there, as well as being able to check out your website. Once again, don't worry, everybody. It's going to be in the show notes. Adam, I just want to say on behalf of the entire Going Long family, appreciate you deciding to invest your time with me and with us today and sharing your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me.
All right, cool. Give me just like literally 10 seconds and we'll be out of here. So Going Long family, take Adam's what, like the stuff that he shared with you today, like even hearing early on, go any place but here. Like take the time, listen to the conversation, share today's conversation with family and friends, talk about the concepts that Adam shared with you. Heck, reach out to him. And especially if you're an engineer and you've got young kids and you feel like you're the only one in the world, well, he's giving you a really, really easy way to connect with other people that are just like yourself. So while you're doing that, I'll be here preparing the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much.